Welcome to the very first episode of the Hodgy Podgy Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Strade, and I'm so excited to finally be embarking on this podcast journey with you. It has been a long time coming, and I cannot wait to do this with you guys. This podcast will be about everything. We'll talk about all the things. It is the Hodgy Podgy Podcast after all, so we're talking about a hodgepodge of things. We will be talking about weird stories, crazy stories, parenting life, dealing with stress, childhood trauma, fun things like talking about the 80s, 90s, 2000s, all of that stuff, the nostalgia of it all. We will be talking about literally everything except politics. This is not the place for politics. This is the one place that you can go to get away from all of that. That is what I wanted for everybody who's listening, where you know that when you go to this podcast, you can escape from that stuff. So I want this to be like we're just friends having a great time, having a great conversation. And it's like, I picture it's like me leaving you a long voicemail because nobody picks up their phone anymore. And I'm just leaving you a long voicemail. And then you finally get back to me via an email or a DM. And we just have the best time going back and forth. And it's amazing. So that is what I'm picturing in my mind this podcast will be like. So with this podcast, I'll be doing 2 episodes a week. Mondays will be Menagerie Mondays, where we talk about all of the fun stuff. Like I said, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, the movies, the music, the food, all of the stuff that we loved back then. And then we'll be talking about weird stories, ghost stories, crazy stories, any stories you want to send me about any of your experiences with any of that stuff. Send them to me and I'll share them on this podcast and we'll talk about it. We'll be talking about also glitches in the Matrix. If you don't know what those are, you're going to learn it on the podcast, and some of them are going to make you just lose your mind. It's insane, some of the stories that I have found and some of the experiences that people have had that you just are like, how did that happen? But it did. And we'll be talking about Mandela effects. If you don't know what Mandela effects are, you're going to learn those too. And those to me are the most wild things. You are positive, absolutely positive that something happened or that someone was a certain way, and then you find out that never actually happened. So I'm going to give you examples in each episode on Mondays, and then you can email me or DM me and we'll talk more about it. Or you can give me your Mandela effects or your glitches, any of that stuff, send my way and I will talk about it. Thursdays though are going to be our more serious days. It's going to be where we go deeper. They are going to be our therapy Thursdays. This is where we talk about dealing with childhood trauma, raising kids when you've had childhood trauma, because that is a whole nother thing that I didn't realize until I had kids. Like, wow, like I know I went through some shit when I was a kid, but raising children and seeing them at those ages I went through stuff, it's wild dealing with that. And we're going to talk about dealing with anxiety, with stress, how much stress affects us. We don't realize because it's just something like, well, stress, it's part of life. That's what we deal with. That's what we go through. Everybody has stress, but we don't realize the effects on our body. We don't realize mentally what it does to us. And we talk about that here. And we talk about anxiety. We talk about the positives and negatives of social media. So I think that we'll go deeper into that stuff because I think that is a big thing that people don't even realize has an effect on their mental health. We'll talk about depression, dealing with that stuff, the negative thoughts that come with that. Myself, I've dealt with that for a long time. And I think people can be really scared to talk about that stuff. Like they're going to be labeled this or labeled that or whatever. And that's not the place for that. We don't do that here. This is for you to be able to talk about that stuff and not worry that you're being judged, not worry about being labeled this or that. This is just like where we can figure this shit out together. And I want this to be a place where you feel like you can do that. Send me your funny stories. Send me your crazy stories, your memories of the things that happened in the 80s and 90s and 2000s that like, do you remember that? I want to go back to that. That was amazing. Send me that stuff and we'll talk about it here. And it will always be anonymous unless you want your name mentioned on the show, but it will always be anonymous. And this is where you can feel like you can connect with other people that have been through similar situations and memories. Like when you talk about the things of the 80s and everybody goes, oh my gosh, you remember that? Or the 90s, oh yeah, TGIF. Like, I love TGIF. And you connect. Like this is where we can connect. And I know people say, well, that's what social media is for. That's what it was for. Now it's just politics and bullshit and mindless reels you send back and forth to your spouse or friends. And it's just, I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect now happening with social media. So that's why I wanted to do this podcast. I had a lot to say and social media was not the way I could express how I wanted to say it, who I wanted to reach. So I decided to do this, and I want you guys to feel the same, to feel like you can come on here, you can email me, you can DM me, and we can have those conversations, fun conversations, deep conversations, and connect here where we can't really on social media, because you can see somebody's post there, but you get all these other comments and everything kind of gets drowned out. So this is where we just have a blast talking about all the weird stories. Like, oh, I had this crazy ghost story that happened to me when I was a kid. And we had the best time doing sleepovers in the 90s. And oh my God, the music of the 2000s. All of this stuff. And we can connect with the fun stuff, but then also be like, man, this life right now is so stressful and I feel this way, and I know that everybody else around me is feeling this way too, but I feel like I don't want to burden them with my stuff. And that is where this podcast comes in, where you send me your burdens, you send me what you're going through, and we talk about it here. And we have other people respond like, man, I'm going through the same thing, or I went through that and this is how I dealt with it and it really helped. That's what this is for. This is for us to help each other grow, to have a good time, to just be friends, be family, be comfortable, and connect with each other. And I really hope that with all of these different episodes we do going forward, that you guys feel that way too. Mondays, we're going to have so much fun talking about different things. I'm planning on doing like themes. We're going to have talking about 80s movies. So one episode will be about 80s movies, and then we'll throw in, a glitch in the Matrix story and a Mandela effect at the end. And then you guys will comment on your thoughts about all of that stuff. And then Thursdays, we'll talk about a specific topic like stress or childhood trauma and dealing with those things. And so the episodes are going to be roughly anywhere between 20 to 45 minutes. I don't want them to be too long. I don't want them to be too short. That's kind of Goldilocks it right in between, depending on what we're talking about. And I just really hope that you will love this podcast as much as I already do. And I just look forward to connecting with you guys. We will have a TikTok page, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us on all of the podcast places, Spotify, iTunes, should be on YouTube as well. And then anywhere that you play your podcast is where I'll be. And I am just absolutely looking forward to connecting with you guys and looking forward to more episodes. Episode 2 is going to be about where we talk about why we are so obsessed with the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and some of our favorite things. I had my friends and family send me lists of their favorite things about those times, and I'll share some of that with you as well. And we'll just connect on just why we are so obsessed with going back to those times. And I just cannot wait to talk about that with you guys. Look forward to doing many, many episodes with you guys, and thanks for tuning in. See you next time.